Hello and welcome to this video on expanding quadratic expressions. This video is going to focus on expanding brackets of quadratic expressions. So in this case, we have x plus 5 times x plus 6. So this is a quadratic expression. It has 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4. And they are multiplying in the middle here with a little hidden multiplication sign there. What we need to do is multiply all of the terms in this first bracket with all of the terms in this second bracket, and vice versa. The easiest way to do that is to remember the acronym FOIL. F-O-I-L. FOIL. So that is the acronym that we use. And what that means, I'll expand it out here. We have first, outer, inner, and last. All of this is talking about just multiplication. So we are just worrying about multiplication. Let's go further than that. I'll just write out my expression again. When I say first, what I mean is that we take the first value in our first bracket and we multiply it with the first value in our second bracket. So remembering we are always multiplying. We take the first value in our first bracket and multiply it with the first value in our second bracket. Now, x times x is not something that you can do in your calculator. But we know that 2 times 2 we can write as 2 squared. 4 times 4 we can write as 4 squared. And even 100 times 100 we can write as 100 squared. So we take this pattern and we can see that if all of these is equal to the number squared, x times x, which is what this is doing, our first times our first, is equal to x squared. So I'm going to write here x squared. The next one we have to do is outer. And this is saying that we take our outer term in our first bracket and we multiply it with our outer term in our second bracket. So we see x is our outer term in our first bracket and 6 is our outer term in our second bracket. So what we are doing here is x times 6, x multiplied with 6. Any number that multiplies with a letter, we just join them together. So we just write 6x. And a way of remembering that one is that if we have 2 apples and we multiply that by 2, so that means you have 2 sets of 2 apples, you have 4 apples. So if we have 1x, which is what we have over there, 1x, and we multiply that with 6, we now have 6x. We have 6 lots of x. So I'm going to write 6x. The next one is inner. So this means that we take our inner term in our first bracket and we multiply it with our inner term in our next bracket. So our inner term in our first bracket is 5 and our inner term in our second bracket is x. 5 times x is 5x. Remember, we are always multiplying. Our last one, we take the last term in our first bracket and we multiply it with the last term in our last bracket. So the last term in our first bracket is 5. We multiply that with the last term in our second bracket, which is 6. 5 times 6 is 30. So here are our 4 terms, x squared, 6x, 5x, and 30. And we can just go ahead and put pluses in between all of these. put an equals sign out the front. And if that's as far as you go, that's okay. That can be your answer. You can move on to the next question. However, there is a step further that we can take this. If you have seen my video on like terms, you'll know that we have 6x here and we have 5x. And those two terms are like terms. They both use the letter x and they have no powers. They just use x. So we can combine them together. So I can write x squared, continuing that down. I can do a plus, and I have positive 6 on the left, and I'm adding positive 5. So 6 plus 5 is 11. So I can write 11x. And then I can go plus 30. So that would be my final answer, x squared plus 11x plus 30. Let's do another one. This time, I won't do plus plus. I'll go x plus 4, and I'll go x take 3. Remember, we are going to use FOIL, F, O, I, and L, remembering first, outer, inner, and last. This is all just with multiplication. And let's go through the order. Our first, once again, we take our first in our first bracket, and we multiply it with our first in our second bracket. X times x is x squared. Next, our outer. We take our outer in our first bracket, and we multiply it with our outer in our last bracket. Keep in mind, this one here now, we are doing x times negative 3. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. We need to keep the operation, the symbol, the sign, with the number. So that is a negative 3, so it's negative 3x. Our next one is inner. So we take our inner in our first bracket, and we multiply it with the inner in our second bracket. So we have 4 times x. 4 times x is 4x. And finally, our last. We take the last in our first bracket, we multiply it with the last in our second bracket, and we have 4 times negative 3. Now, I recommend grabbing your calculator and putting this into your calculator. 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Those are our 4 terms. We can add pluses in between them all, like that, a little equals sign out the front, and you can finish there. That's okay. We can keep going though, because you can see that we've got 3x here, negative 3x here, and 4x here. So we can combine those together. We can go x squared, and you can get your calculator and type in negative 3 plus 4. Now, negative 3 plus 4 is positive 1. So I'll go positive 1x plus, and our final one is negative 12, plus negative 12. We shall do one more. This time I have both negatives. Once again, we remember our acronym, FOIL, first, outer, inner, last, FOIL. So I'll write it out here, first, outer, inner, and last. Once again, multiplication each time. So we'll start with our first. We take our first in our first bracket and our first in our second bracket, and we write x squared. X times x is x squared. Outer. We take our outer in our first bracket and our outer in our second bracket. Our outer in our second bracket is negative 4. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. Inner. Take our inner in our first bracket, multiply it with our inner in our second bracket. Our inner in our first bracket is negative 2, so we multiply that with x, and we have negative 2x. Finally, our last in our first bracket, multiply with our last in our last bracket. Grab your calculators and you will see that -2 times -4 is +8. A negative times a negative equals a positive. So I will write pluses in between, a little equals out the front, and you can stop there. We can go one step further though, and we can write x squared. We can combine these two terms. -4 plus -2 is equal to -6. So I can write -6x and join our +8 on the end. And that is our answer. So that is how you expand basic quadratic expressions. First, outer, inner, last. Hope this is helpful. Have a look at the rest of my videos. Have a look at expanding more advanced quadratic expressions because they could also be helpful.